Siege.
Because he is one of the platinum sponsors of the event, so thank you very much for that. I would like to take this moment now to introduce our keynote speaker. Mr. Bushnell is a founder of Atari, and also, as many people in here know, but the rest of our industry may not, the founder of Chuck E. Cheese, or Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater Company, I think is the correct name. So with no further ado, let's jump right in, and thank you, Mr. Bushnell, for being here.
Great. I woke up this morning in Paris, and got on an airplane and came here and just barely squeaked in. Like I've been in this hotel for about 15 minutes, so I can assure you that I did shower, however, so that was a good thing. But I just wanted to pass along that some of the news that's going on in Paris right now, because it probably doesn't happen here, but the Quasimodo's family, you know, the bell ringer in Notre Dame, has been ringing the bell in Notre Dame for years and years and years. And finally, the last of the generation died, and so they need to have a new bell ringer. And so the cardinals asked from all around to bring in people who wanted to ring the bell. And he was interviewing several people, and a guy came, and he had no arms. And the guy says, well, how are you going to ring the bell? And he says, I'll show you. And so they went up on the bell tower, and he ran across the platform and bang, put his face right into the bell. Well, it was a gorgeous, beautiful tone. And the cardinal says, well, yeah, okay, you've got the job, great. And he jumped up and down, and he was so happy, slipped, and he fell to his death. It was all over the newspapers. And the cardinal went down, and there he was laying in the courtyard, and a reporter came up and says, who was that? And he says, I don't know, but his face rings a bell. But, just a second. True story. But they still didn't have a bell ringer. And so they continued the interviews. The next day, a guy shows up and he says, I gotta have this job. The guy that fell to his death was my brother. And he says, well, yeah, but you gotta ring the bell. So they went up in the tower. He pulled on it, great golden tone. He says, yeah, remember your brother, you got it. Well, the family must have had something, because he got jumping up and down and fell to his death as well. 2 deaths in a day. They go down. They say, what's the story here? And he says, I don't know who he is, but he's a dead ringer for his brother. So, that's all the news there is to print from Paris. Let's see. Let's start out a little bit. This was my summer job while I was in college. And I was on the Midway the first year. And it turned out I had an advertising company, but I could spend money like a drunken sailor. I was often drunken, but I wasn't a sailor at the time. And so I felt that to keep myself from doing that, I'd get a fun job at the amusement park. Well, I found out I was pretty good at it. And so, and this is what I did when I was at the University of Utah. That's Dr. Evans, who did Evans and Sutherland and was one of the computer graphics pioneers, really. And this is what, 256K RAM looks like in. It was ugly. This was PDP-1. My fraternity brother says, meet me at the engineering lab at midnight, and I'm going to blow your socks off. Wanting to have my socks blown off, I said, okay. And so I pedaled my bicycle, which was the preferred transportation for engineering geeks at the time, and went into the PDP-1, where I played Space War. And it turns out that Steve Russell from MIT a few years before had created this game, and it went like wildfire to every computer, and they were even shipping it with every PDP-1 that they installed. This is about $2 million worth of hardware, to put it in perspective. So this is the chronology. In 1958, a guy named Willie Higginbotham did a game that was like this for the Brookhaven's labs in New York, and took an oscilloscope with relays and capacitors and made a ping pong game. It was just a demo, and nobody took it very seriously, but I really think he was a major pioneer. And then Steve Russell and a couple of other guys did this thing called Space War on a PDP-1. That was what captured me. And at the time, there were a lot of games floating around. There were tennis games, there was a baseball game, I wrote one called Fox and Geese, where you had one fox and he had to run around and eat the geese, and the geese were trying to corner him. And that was kind of the nature of the video game business in the middle 60s. There was a game from Nutting Associates called Computer Quiz. No computer in that. There was a slide projector that did a trivia game. You know, just thought I wanted to make that clear. This was about I think they shipped their first one in 1968. But it's important because Nutting Associates, they had pretty much run the market on that. They were desperate for a product. And so when I came with Computer Space, they licensed it from me. And I designed that cabinet on my kitchen table with modeling clay. The girl in the brochure was a topless dancer at a bar around the corner. That's a whole nother story. And we really had fun. Now, I mean nutting, not me and the girl, you know, you dirty-minded people. Anyway, it was great times, and this was, and then we did Pong. Pong was an accident. We had just gotten a contract with Bally and Midway to do a driving game using the Computer Space. Computer Space, we did about $2.5 million in sales, which we thought was a failure. Turns out that it wasn't so bad for the first one out. The problem with Computer Space was that all my friends loved it, but all my friends were engineers. And it did really well around college campuses, and it did no money at all in a working man bar because it was just a little too complex. You had to turn around, retro thrust to move it, and unless you knew Newton's second law, you had no chance. So the guy on the left was my partner, Ted Dabney. He and I started it. We each put in $250, and never looked back, so we were 50-50. There are actually two innovations there. One is Pong, the other is the polka dot shirt. The polka dot shirt did not catch on. And then there's Fred Marinchek, who was our first CFO, who sort of stole some money, and so we fired him. And then there's Al Alcorn. And Al Alcorn is a brilliant guy, and he is the actual inventor of Pong. I get credit for it, which is just, if you get credit for something you didn't do, that's pretty good. But Al actually did it. And how it went was Al started his very first day on the day that I heard that there was a competitor in town. And it turned out that Magnavox was showing their consumer product at a hotel in Burlingame, California. And I went up to see it, and I signed the logbook and looked at it, and I said, boy, that's a lame game. And driving back, I was relieved because I didn't want to have any competition. And it was a ping pong game. And driving back, I thought of all the ways that if I were to do a tennis game, I would do it more like the games that I'd seen at the university. So it really reminded me, and this is important for later on because Magvox ended up suing us for patent infringement and all that sort of stuff. And it was just a pain in the ass. And since then, Ralph Baer has been claiming that he invented Pong, which he didn't. But anyway, that's another story. And so I told Al, I said, let's use the digital technology and do a ping pong game. And I described what the Magnavox thing did. I described what some of the units, the ones on the big mainframes did. And he started putting them together because the technology was pretty complex and he had no experience with it. And I thought it was a simple one. The plan was we were going to throw it away. We didn't believe that this was going to be a marketable product in the coin-operated game business, which is where our center of gravity was. Well, we started, the original design for the game was you turn the knob and you position it, then you push a button and a little tennis racket goes like this and hits the ball. If you hit it early, it'll go up. If you hit it late, it'll go down. If you hit it right, it'll go straight across. That was the plan. He got it to the point where it was just the paddle. And we thought, well, just to test it out, let's make it so that if it hits the top corner, it'll go up. If it hits the bottom corner, it'll go down. If it hits the middle. Now, it turns out that was really important because if you make one simple mistake and say angle of reflection equals angle of incidence, the game isn't fun. Because, and that means if it hits the paddle, if it always goes off in an angle, because there's no offense, defense, and it's not, it becomes just a game of defense, it's not fun. And so that all of a sudden made the game fun. And then we started having a lot of volleys. And so we decided that we would, after I think it was 7 hits, we'd speed the ball up, and after 11 hits, we'd speed it up again, and then we'd make the paddle smaller. All of those things made it really funner and funner and funner. We found ourselves staying after work, playing it for hours. And all of a sudden you scratch your head and say, hey, maybe there's a product here. And so we really liked it. And I thought to myself, maybe I can get Bally Midway to take this puppy instead of the driving game. We'll complete the contract 6 months sooner than we were planning to. And we'll still get all the money. And it'll be good to go. And so I got on an airplane, flew back to Chicago, and presented the game. Oh, Al put it in a box and made it thing so we could hook it up to a regular TV, so I could basically take it in my luggage. And I went, and they looked at it, and they said, I don't know, it's a 2-player, there's no 1-player. I don't know. And so I went flying back, kind of dejected. And I said, yeah, but this thing's fun. And so on my way on the airplane, I calculated every penny that we had and how much I thought we could build these things for, because we were planning to be a design house for the other manufacturers. We never thought we'd be in the manufacturing business. We were just a couple of engineers wet behind the ears and no money. Had a little bit of money from the royalties and a little money from the contracts, but that was about it. And so the minute I landed, I found out that we had a problem. And the problem was that the unit, while I was gone, they had decided they were going to put a test at Andy Capp's Tavern, and it had just failed. And of course, you can't have a product that's not reliable. So we went down, and the failure mode was that the coin box had completely filled up so that you couldn't put any more quarters in it. We can fix that one. And to put it in context, I told the guys, if you can have a coin-operated game that earns $20 a week, excuse me, $20 a day, that's a good game. If it earns $30 a day, that's a blockbuster. And I didn't go above that because none of them did that. We were earning between $50 and $70 a day. Now, if you go through the math, you say, how in the hell can people put that many quarters in there? There ain't enough time. But somehow, they were doing it. People were lining up for the bars to open. And you know, that's not normal, but the people that are lining up for the bars to open usually have the shakes. Anyway, and so that was kind of the Pong game. I figured that we could build 13, and we shipped them up to the distributor, the coin-op distributor in San Francisco, and we got a cabinet maker, and we figured everything out, and we hired a bunch of employees from the state, which were all heroin addicts. Found out that the TV sets were easily fenced. We made every mistake you could think of, but slowly but surely we figured out what was going on. And do you know what the biggest problem we had? Shipping container. We totally had no idea we were going to be in the manufacturing. It took 6 weeks to get a shipping container. So we bought an old 1948 stake bed truck, and we were making shipments down to Los Angeles just, because we couldn't use common carriers because we didn't have shipping container. Anyway, one time the whole truck broke down with all the net worth of the company. This was Magnavox Odyssey. It was an analog game. And this is another picture, another fashion statement there. That didn't catch on much. But this was the Pong. Oh, got to tell you a story about this. We took the Pong game. It wasn't really a Pong game. It was a wood pretend Pong game that we hadn't gotten the tooling done. But it looked like this, but it was hollowed out wood, and we just drilled a hole up through and put the pot in the knobs because the chip wasn't done either. So we had this big rack of equipment under the table, nice skirt around it. We glued the thing down on the top of the table so you couldn't move it and see that it was not real or that the chip wasn't there. But fooled everybody, including us. We sold 0. Most successful consumer product, and we sold 0. Why? Well, it turns out that the toy companies, the toy retailers, didn't sell anything that cost more than $29 at the time. And we were asking $79 for it. And so you say, this thing, all my neighbors want one, everybody that we talk to wants one, and we can't get a single toy store to buy it? Something wrong here. My head of marketing said, let's try the TV manufacturers. And so we went to they're called brown goods in the parlance of the time. And we pounded on all the doors, and they said no, because they'd had kind of a bad experience with Magnavox, and Magnavox had some big returns because everybody thought they were getting the coin-op Pong for home, and it wasn't that. And so they said, ping pong game for the home, why is this different than the Odyssey? And so they said, "Nyet." They actually said no. They said "niet" in Russian. and then we called the head buyer from Sears Sporting Goods. Now, Sears turns into ping pong and billiards and things like that, basically rec room fun in the winter. And just the year before, they had sold a consumer pinball machine for about $300, and they'd sold out of it. I think they only bought about 5,000, but they sold out. And so the buyer said, whoa, pool tables are in bars, ping pong tables are in bars, these pinballs sold out, and they were in bars. Pong's in bars. Perfect. So we call him, he says, wow, that's great. And the next morning, he was on our doorstep in California. And we thought that was a good sign. And we went in the conference room and talked about the product and told him all this stuff. We didn't realize he was already sold. He had already sort of made up his mind. And so he said, how many can you make? Well, we hadn't even thought about it. And so I went out with my manufacturing guy and I said, how many do you think we can make? He said, well, maybe 25,000 if we get started. And it depends on getting the tooling done and all this other stuff. And so I went in and I said 75,000. And you know, because I didn't want to be single sourced. And he came back with an order for 150,000. Well, you know, all of a sudden you say, is it possible? And some really interesting things happen when all of a sudden you're faced with a reality that is outside of your experience curve. So we started pushing around and we could solve almost every one of the logistics problems except one: money. We had no money. You know, we had some money. We'd always been profitable, but we'd always put all the money back in the business. And as everybody knows, when a company is growing, it consumes capital. The financial community thought that the video game business was silly. I mean, wheat or iron or steel or something like that, that's real stuff. Games? Ha! And besides that, coin-operated game business is controlled by the mafia. That's what I mean, I heard that all the time, and I said, hey, it's not a problem. If they give me an offer I can't refuse, I won't refuse it. You know? So, turns out there actually is a certain taint, or was, in the coin-operated game business. You know, having a distributor whose nickname was Bullets. And later on, when I was asked to be on the board of a gaming company, they gave me a list of the do not associates, you know, that basically you can't associate with certain people. I'll be damned if I didn't know 5 of the guys on the list. Spent a weekend in the home of one of them. But anyway, that's another story. The money was an issue. And I finally just called up Tom, the guy at Sears, and I said, I can't afford to take this order. I can't fulfill it because I don't have enough cash for the inventory. He says, oh, why didn't you say so? I'll introduce you to Sears Bank. And so we had a bonded warehouse at the end of the production line. We got advanced 90% of the wholesale price that we were selling to Sears when it dropped off. So we were basically cash flow positive from day one using that facility, and everything worked. I think that year we actually, Sears sold out and re-upped the order, and I think before Christmas that year, we sold 350,000 Pong machines. Boy, was that fun. You know, anyway. Then we decided we were going to, you know, and a lot of people don't realize this, but there was sort of a year of the weird game. We did Pong, then we did a Super Pong, but with that we did Stunt Cycle on a chip, and we did TV Ping Pong on a chip. And these were pretty good, but these were, you know, $60 games that played one game. And it was really easy to see that that wasn't a smart thing to do. Now, to put it in context, there were no personal computers at the time. This was 1976. Remember, the microprocessor was only invented in 1974. And it was the 4004, was just weak and crap. It was a 4-bit microprocessor. What can you do with that? And it wasn't until 1977 that the 6502 came along, which became strong enough and fast enough to be able to do, with a lot of glue parts around it, to do video games. And that's what the Atari 2600 was. It's 6502, the Stella chip, which basically was the graphics processor, and it could make really, really blocky games. I mean, the smallest pixel was quarter inch by a quarter inch, not because we thought square balls were cool, but it's all we could do. Anyway, and it became the Atari and a huge success. Made another big mistake. Do you know what it was? We thought that the typical person would buy 3 cartridges. And so we built to those volumes. It turns out that when people bought the first unit, they bought every cartridge. And so all of a sudden we had a whole bunch of games on the shelf and no cartridges. Really, figure we left about $14 million on the table that would have been able to sell. But anyway, we saved some money on inventory. Put other little things in here in context. First driving game, Grand Track, almost put us out of business. Job cost accounting, we found out that we were shipping about a $200 bill with everyone. The hurrier you go, the behinder you get. We learned how to do proper costing after that. But you live and learn. And then, of course, I sold the company in 1976. Warner came in. They were record executives that were kind of running it. And dumb as a post. And I used to tell them so, and that was not necessarily an ingratiating thing. You know, why do they never have a convention of record executives in the Astrodome? There's not enough room for the egos. Anyway, old joke. It's not even a good joke. These are some of our games. A lot of people don't realize that we actually had a very, very small market share. There was Winner, there was TV tennis, there was all kinds of different games. And because even though we built it, we didn't have a factory. We were trying to figure it out as we were going along, and there was so much demand. And so our strategy was to out-innovate the bastards, because it was the only thing. And slowly but surely, we figured out ways to mess people up. It was measures and countermeasures. And so I've always felt that stealth and guile was actually okay in business. And for example, I love this one. We were a big enough consumer of chips that we could get them marked any way we wanted to. So in our games, we would put an obscure chip, something that was really, not normal. We would then mismark it so that it looked like, if you didn't notice that there was M on the end of it instead of a J, it was like, instead of a NAND gate, it was a NOR gate, which meant that if you built it and if you were copying it and didn't know what you're doing and just did it that way, it'd never work. But we did another thing. Some of these chips at the time were obscure and there weren't that many made of them. And so we would corner the market before we shipped. And you could corner the market for like $3,000, $4,000, because you could buy all these, because these chips were a quarter, 35 cents, and since they were not the normal stuff, there was not that many. So you corner the market before the chip manufacturers could catch up. We'd release the product. All our competitors who were copying us would try to go find that chip, you know? And of course, it was actually the wrong chip. And I know for a fact that we bankrupted one of our competitors. Huh? See, business is a little bit like whack-a-mole. You really, when a competitor pops up, you just want to knock him back down. And slowly but surely, we were able to get rid of all the competitors, out-innovate the bastards, and in 1977, we had a 84% market share, which is just damn near a monopoly, but you don't use that word. Monster. So what we're doing now, there's U-Wink. Do you guys want more or less detail? Little crazy stuff? Okay. Sometimes I feel like, now if my wife were here, she'd say, Nolan, somebody else wanted to say something. But anyway, did a company called U-Wink that uses the tap code software, and it's sort of Chuck E. Cheese on steroids. All touchscreen at every table. You can order your food through touchscreen, and then it's just brought to you. Swipe your credit card. Take a typical restaurant. The waiter or waitress makes between 9 and 14 trips to your table. With this one, it's 2. There's another tremendous advantage. From the time you sit down, you can have a martini on your table within 3 minutes. That's progress. We had not just games, but we had some funny things. Their Explorer, and Love and Fortune. That's code for things that girls might like. Good stuff. You can order beer, what have you. Before I rock off on that, let me talk a little bit about Chuck E. Cheese. I should have a big Chuck E. Cheese sign up there, but I don't. Did you know that Chuck E. Cheese started out as a division of Atari? I started inside Atari, and Warner didn't want it, and so I bought it from them. And it was originally going to be Coyote Pizza. And my guys and I were at the amusement park show. It was actually in Atlanta. It's called the IAAPA. And I went in, and there was a guy selling walk-around costumes, things that you wear. And there was this coyote costume, I thought. And I bought it and had it shipped to the factory. And I took it into the engineers, and I said, you want to make this talk, animated. And he said, oh, yeah, sure. We had some good mechanical engineers and air cylinders and all that stuff, and they cut it apart and got it talking. And I said, hey, how's the coyote coming? He says, coyote? What coyote? And I said, the coyote costume. He says, that's not a coyote costume, it's a rat costume. And I said, no, it's not. It's coyote. It's got the big teeth, yeah. And he says, well, I can tell you for sure, the coyotes don't have a big pink tail. And I went in, and sure enough, the costume, I'd never seen the bottom part of it, and it had a big pink tail. And the funny part about it is once you looked at it as a rat, it couldn't be a coyote again. And so now I had a real problem. I could delay the project, or I could change it from Coyote Pizza to, we thought, Rick Rat's Pizza. Well, I brought it up to a marketing meeting, and everybody says, boy, that really stinks. This is a restaurant after all, and the cheese. And a mouse, you can kind of get away with it, but a rat? No. They said, you got to sort of de-emphasize the rat thing. And so we got our ad agency involved, and I said, what should we name this thing? And I said, we should have it be something that makes you feel happy. And so they came back a week later and said, we got a 3-smile name for you. I said, what? What's a 3-smile name? And they said, Chuck E. Cheese. And that's how it went from Coyote Pizza to Rick Rat's Pizza to Chuck E. Cheese. And that's a true story. And we didn't miss our deadline. The day that we opened, we knew we had a problem. It was 5,000 square feet. Most pizza parlors are 1,000 square feet. And so I said, 5 times larger, that's got to go. We knew it was too little. And the very first one, instead of having the animals on the stage, we had them all around with one in the middle, sort of the thing, because we thought it'll be a theater in the round and there won't be any particular seat that's better than another one. People hated it. They said, I feel like all I'm doing is turning around and breaking my neck. And so I said, okay, we'll do a proscenium arch on the next one, which we did. And we did 25,000 feet. Took over an old grocery store, painted the inside black. It was just too big. It was cavernous. Parents were losing their kids and never finding them again. It was fun. When Chuck E. Cheese, when we had a lot of them, do you know that we broke about 14 to 30 wrists a weekend? Little kids run, they fall down, they break their wrist. It's just one of those things. But just thought you might enjoy that. Let's talk a little bit about the present now. The economic models that are working big time is the subscription, World of Warcraft, what have you. Buy the box is still working. I mean, you can go to any GameStop or any of these things, and they're still selling boxes, lots of them. The download experience is really starting to give way to what we call free-to-play, pay-to-win, and with virtual goods. Game wagering is getting important, and ad-supported is another part. But that's pretty much it. It turns out that if you can come up with a creative economic model, very often it's more important than a good game. So always try to figure out ways, how do you get people to pay for stuff? And the better off you are at that, the more probable you're going to have a success. Let's talk about the landscape a little bit. Massively multiplayer online games, crash and burn, get a bunch of your friends together, hot girls. This is a very, very important part of the world. We all know the App Store and the iPhone, but the Android is going to be huge, primarily because Apple has always liked walled gardens. Apple has always focused on the affluent world, which says that they will sell some in Japan, they will sell some in China, but not a lot. The Androids will be out, it will be a bastardized market, but it'll be a huge market. Massive. And I am predicting that the DS market will probably go away for everyone who is over 8. DS will maybe stay for the under 8s, but all the rest of it will move over to either the Android or to the iTouch. And so when you're thinking about it, I think one of the bigger opportunities coming forward, even though understand that the iPhone users are spending much more per phone than the Androids will. I believe part of that is because the presentation and the ability to find and the ability to actually pay for something on the Android is just god-awful. That will get fixed, or it'll get worse. And you don't know for sure, but you know, it's a thing where if you can help it get better, there's a tremendous opportunity there. I'm a big believer in augmented reality. Now, augmented reality is really GPS-aware games, also use of the accelerometers and the gyros. And what it really is you're playing games in your world and or through your world. And this is an area that is hugely growing. This is a game called In the Trees, and you plant various things and take stuff away. A lot of you know XYZ, but phi, rho, and theta become very, very important. And the difference is the XYZ describes a point in space, phi, rho, and theta gives you a vector. Once you have a vector in space, all of a sudden you can create an overlay. And the overlay can look something like this. And you know, one of the things that happens in this world is that I was at a security conference, and the person speaking said to me, said, hey, you know, privacy, get over it. It's really, really a situation today where the cat is really out of the bag, and so much of your personality and all the things that you did, and even stuff that you've not done, but you've been accused for, stays with you. For example, people say, well, you know, gee, Nolan, I've heard so much about you. And I have to say, that thing about the goat wasn't true. Anyway. This is another version of an augmented reality. That's real. I saw, I'm under non-disclosure on that one. Imagine, if you would, a Monopoly board kind of thingy. And when you look at that Monopoly board, all of a sudden you see a cityscape with critters, ugly insects. And there's a crosshair on your phone, and you're shooting those guys, and they're dying. And as you move around this world, and the world can be as big as a Chuck E. Cheese, maybe. Augmented reality is so damn fun. Remember when we were playing around with synthetic, artificial reality, and you'd spend 15 minutes in there and come out and heave your guts out? If you really want to create a business that fails, just do one that makes your customers sick. And that was the problem. The lag time between the head-mounted display and your glasses was too much. And so people who were motion sickness, and almost everybody was, almost you could not really get used to it. I think if you played over and over and over again, about 15% of the population could get over motion sickness. I took, I did sailboat racing for a while, and you could build up your resistance to it, and so you could in this case too, but it took a long time. I believe that the thing that augmented reality does is it keeps a stable frame of reference so that you don't fall victim to that problem. I don't know, in the early days of Doom and some of those other very, very realistic video games, we had an awful lot of motion sickness issues. And today, serious gamers don't have a problem. New gamers often do, particularly in these new, if you have a big, big screen that takes in a big portion of your view, it's really tough. A little more augmented reality. I really can't stress more how big this is going to be in the next few years. So if you want to do something for next year and the year after, this really should be on your radar screen. Skill game wagering. If you can't tell, of course, hot girls are always good. But anyway, skill game wagering is something that's going to be increasingly encouraged and increasingly taxed. Government is constantly trying to figure out more ways of extracting money from the population, and things that today are illegal. There's several pieces of legislation that are going to legalize gaming. And I believe that this is going to be a thing that was flourishing in the United States, and then it was shut down because they stopped the credit card companies. It's going to be turned on again, probably within 18 months, is my guess. And right now you can get away with a certain amount of skill game wagering in all but about 8 states. But when they open it up, it will be absolutely a federal regulation, and it'll be a big part of the market. We all know about virtual goods, where you buy stuff, virtual swords and that, and it's been around for quite a while. It's essentially what created Zynga. How many heard about the latest valuation of Zynga? Zynga had a valuation in excess of, $14 billion? Some crazy number. And as a result, because they got valued at so much, if you have a social game company right now, let's say that you want to start a game company, what you need to do is you need to get 2 or 3 pretty smart people together, and maybe a goat, and you can get funded, because the Zynga deal did such a big umbrella that if Zynga is worth $14 billion, your goat's worth a couple of million. And just start thinking about it. It's a great time to raise money for a social game. And you don't necessarily have to have a goat. You can do a lamb or a small cow. I was a little ahead of myself. I was just talking about social games. And how many of you play Mafia Wars? Well, so you do have a life. I got into Mafia Wars a little bit because I really wanted to see what all the hoo-ha was, and I just couldn't deal with Farmville. It was just not enough mayhem. And the thing that's interesting about it is that there's something subtly engaging about causing these little thermometers to move across. And I'm not sure why. But if it's worth $14 billion, I'm good to go. All this other stuff. This is something that I'm working on that I think is going to be massive. What are the things that we want to do in a video game? We want it to be immersive, right? Looking at something through a screen is not that immersive. You're still in your body. You've got your monster, but you're still out there. Yeah, you can sort of have permission to believe that you're in there, but wouldn't it be better if you were actually in the game? Well, it turns out we have a problem. It's a big problem. The dirty, rotten Stemmons have shut down our space lab. The space lab is totally dark. We're blind in that whole section of the galaxy. We need to transport a group of you up to fix that damn thing. So I'm looking for volunteers, and if you volunteer and pay me $12, I will transport you up there and let you try to fix it. Once you're transported up there, and we've designed a vibrating platform, a bunch of funny fans that disorient you. You turn out the lights, and the strobes go off, and everything is going crazy. And then it goes dark, and two walls open, and you swear to God that you've been transported up onto the thing, which you actually have been. And we're not telling how you do it, but you're now up in space. First thing you have to do is go through the laser maze, because we do have some security, and we're not going to let any Tom, Dick, or Harry in here unless they paid $12. And so you get through that, and you're scored, and then you go into a room where the floor is totally electrified. No, it doesn't electrocute you, but it's lit up, and you have to step on the green tiles in a certain way, and then they move around, and if you don't do it right, then you die. Not really, unless you paid $12. And then you have to load the reactor. The dilithium crystals are all over the floor. What a mess. And you have to put them together, and then you have to feed them into the reactor on a conveyor belt. And then after you do that, you have to turn the damn reactor on. And so we go into a room of these massive control things, and it's just like Dr. No, except you don't have a gray jumpsuit. Maybe we'll get you a gray jumpsuit.
It costs more than $12.
Huh?
It would cost more than $12 for the jumpsuit.
Well, maybe for $12 we'll let you use one. If we're really successful, it'll go up to $15. Anyway, so you get the thing turned on, and now it says, reactor starting up in 7 minutes, or 3 minutes. And now, Mission Control has been talking to you all this time, telling you how to do stuff and that. And now it tells you, we forgot to tell you a little problem. You've been operating on backup power here up on the space station. We can't operate the transporter to bring you back down unless the reactor is going. Little problem though, the reactor isn't shielded. This was a robotic crew that they shut down. And so you're going to get irradiated and die, or you can't, and we can't get you down unless you can find a special series of shunts and extra crystals floating around in space, and you tractor beam them in. So you go into this tractor beam thing, you tractor beam in these extra crystals that go into the temporary thing. You get just barely enough power to run the transporter, and it brings you down to safety, and you don't die after all, which is really good on our liability insurance. So anyway, for $12, you're going to get to do that, and it'll be really fun. This is a little bit further out, but bioimplants are really cool. And what's really happening is that there is a lot of things going on with tattoos that are in private, no, I'm not going to go there, that are actually conductive. And I've seen some people who can type on their hands, just like that, and they have a little Bluetooth connector that looks like a wristwatch that connects to things that are done on their hands. And so all of a sudden you can text like this and not go to jail while you're driving, and various good things like that. There are tattoos that are only visible in black light. So you can be really funky and junky in a disco, but you can be an attorney during the day, and it's no big deal. So that's kind of cool. Now, they're working on one that is very narrow band frequencies of blacklight. And the idea is that you have various tattoos overlaid, and when you sequence the black light, they animate. Is that cool? Huh? I don't know if that's a game, but it's cool. And of course, bioimplants is all about jacking in. And this is an in-the-eye display. It's not extremely high resolution, but evidently you don't need to be. It's a contact lens. That's a keyboard on your arm. This is what the stylish geek is wearing this fall. And all of that is being shrunk down into a pair of glasses. And it is pretty interesting. So now you can have the augmented reality situation in front of you like this. Now, I want a pair of those, I'm sorry, because you can not only play games, but you can watch movies on an airplane on a 50-inch screen and that's in front of the guy, virtually in front of the guy in front of you. Who knows anything about fiducials? You've probably seen these flopping around. These are QR codes. This turns out to be something that a relatively crappy ARM processor can figure out. The new multi-core chipsets for both the Android and the iPhone are going to be able to detect a can of Coke, going to be able to detect the Starbucks logo. And all of a sudden, once the power of the QR code is put onto everyday objects, all of a sudden you will find that the world comes alive for you. And it's done with fiducial pattern recognition software. This was actually a thing that was done in New York that was modestly successful from HSBC. Some more fun stuff. This is a game that uses fiducials for the units. This is another one that it's looking at this playboard below. This is from Media Lab. This is another fashion statement. This is a part that is even a little bit further out, but there's some tremendous jumps being made in actually tapping in and jacking into your brain. They're finding how to map your brain. One of the problems is that not everybody's mind is mapped the same way. Of course, we knew that, particularly those of us who are married. And we found that people don't think the same way, and so therefore, to control things, they have to be mapped on the unique individual. It's another fashion statement. But it's really this, they believe they can take those sensors, which take very, very high speed images of your brain activity, and they're getting software that's been able to cross-correlate that once they've done a little bit of training to do amazing things. And they believe they can get that cost down to sub $200, which is amazing. I'm a big believer in robotics. This is what when a group of people who get tired of cleaning their floors decide to try to play Pac-Man, and it's actually pretty cool to watch. This is some haptic kinds of things. This is Mindstorm. Public space games are moving in some funny directions. This is one that was done by my son. It's a 6-player game of Snakey. This is a game that's done in Shanghai. This is the In the Trees game, which is all played in public spaces. Dirty Rotten Monkey is always coming in and messing up that game. This is a unit that you can play games with. This is actually taken from Burning Man. How many have been to Burning Man? Anybody? Burning Man is really cool. Put it on your list of things to do next year. It's the last week in February or in August, and you see some of the coolest things. It's a big party, and there's a lot of stuff. This is in Hamburg, Germany. This is a game sculpture that reacts to the people around it. We know the Move and the Wii and that sort of thing. This is a unit this is about 4 years old, a whole bunch of stuff in which you're basically imaged. Excuse me, the Michelin Man in there is actually you, and you move around and beat other people up and various other things that we've always wanted to do. This is a haptic controller. Haptics, for those who are not used to the word, means that if you get punched, you feel it. I got to tell you a story about. We had a game called Tank, and we thought it'd be fun. And there were strategies where if you let the guy hit you, then you can go and hit him twice. Well, that's not real world. I mean, if you're really running a tank, you don't want to get hit once. So we thought, let's put a little skin in the game. So we put electrodes in the controllers and a little knob, because we said not everybody's going to want to wager. So what you were doing is you were wagering a shock. So if you got hit, you got whacked. And first of all, people cheat. When they'd see a shell coming towards them, they'd sometimes let go. And so we kind of put a little skin in the game and had them put Velcro around. But now, the thing that was funny is that we didn't need a knob. It would have been a switch. People either said, hey, I ain't doing this, or they said, you're going down. And they'd put it to the max. There was only two things. But the game earned no money, which showed that people who weren't willing to man up to do it would just say, oh no, I don't like to play that game. We're all cowards. We don't like pain. And so I'm not convinced that haptics are going to be worth anything. Because, if you're playing World of Warcraft and the other guy with the sword starts whacking on you and you get black and blue, I don't think that's going to work, but that's just me. This is a haptic controller for that gives you physical feedback when you're doing surgery. And this thing is working right now. I think over 90% of knee surgery today is robotic. This is one for the game business. It's pretty cool. It's called the Falcon. It's available for about $150. It's wired into Half-Life and some of these other things. These are available and very good. You know, I leave this in, but we know that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's a Kindle or it's an iPad. It's not going to look anything like that. And I can honestly say that I read the newspaper every morning with my cereal on an iPad, and it's really interesting. I have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal and to the Financial Times out of London, and I love being able to read the Daily Mail, and I even scan the New York Post, even though it's allegedly a trashy magazine, but it's good pictures. More weird stuff in terms of eye tracking. Fan marketing. The new Woodstock. What's this? I keynoted in Bilbao, Spain. 50,000 gamers that were provided with a table and a chair and a 50 gigabit connection. And it was a 4-day event, and talk about a geek fest. Everybody was having a ball. Everybody was playing games almost 24/7. And when they finally dropped with exhaust, they turned the left side of the convention center into tents. Along another wall was a wall of microwaves. And so they'd bring their groceries and their cup of noodles or whatever the hell else they wanted, and they would game until they dropped or got hungry, microwaved up a couple of hot dogs, and it was really an amazing event. And I actually think that this is a growing trend. I mean, are you guys having fun here? Of course you are. We have shared goals. We have shared fun. And, you know, gamers are cool, I think. Change, innovation, entertainment. What do you want me to talk about? Anything more? Amplify? What? What's that? Oh, you want to know about the goat? If I drink enough Monster and you find me in a bar tonight having a cocktail, I'll tell you about the goat. It's actually a joke. It's not real.
If I may, were there any games post-Atari that you personally got involved with or enjoyed on Nintendo or on Genesis or anything after PlayStation? Or what sort of Atari were your game sort of interest ended?
Well, you know, I have always liked hard games. Like, and I've been a gamer most of my life. I'm a big Risk fan. I love Settlers of Catan. Have you guys played Settlers of Catan? I mean, there's some amazing games that are coming out of this movement in Germany, and they're being published over here. But you know, there's a card game called Beans. Have you played Beans? Anyway, those are fun. But they're not video games. But I think that a lot of them have some of that aspect. There's a whole series of games that are coming that use the iPad or the Kindle as the shared experience, and then the iPhone or the Android as the private personal perspective portion of gameplay. If you really look at the structure of games, there's the shared experience and there's the private personal experience. Poker. We all see the chips or we see the river and the cards, but then we have our private personal experience, and that makes a good game. And this is a lot of part of what's going on. But for me, the milestones that sort of formed me was I loved all of the coin-op games, both the stuff that I did and the stuff that we did from others. Like, I personally did a game called Breakout. That was one of mine, and I had it programmed up by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Just to put it in context. Now, and I can tell you how stupid I was. I had a chance to own a third of Apple Computer for $50,000, and I had it. Wow. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. Anyway, and I regret it, but my wife regrets it even more. But then, in terms of games that I really like, I love Doom. I thought Doom was just an absolute mind-boggling step forward. I knew how hard it was to get the PC, which was really, really a lame architecture for gameplay at the time. For them to get that to play Doom, I thought was just incredible. In fact, I would have bet that it couldn't have been done before I saw it. And I was very impressed, and I think that was really great. I loved The Sims. I played a lot of Sims for a while. I really, really liked the early Warcrafts. I got heavily into Warcraft. But I've always been a chess player, and I've always been a Go player. And I loved, in fact, I was on the internet 3 to 4 years before it was legal for me to be there. I'm a little bit of a hacker, and I was the only undergraduate at the University of Utah that had a private office. And for those of you who are in college, I'll tell you how to do it. They give private offices to graduate students, and sometimes you share and sometimes you don't. But all you have to do is go to school about 2 weeks before it starts, and you go find an empty office, and you just move your stuff in and put your name on the door. And then somebody, may or may not come by and say, I thought I was assigned this office. And you can, depending on how you feel during that day, you can either share your office with him, or you can say, they must have made a mistake. I've had this office for years. Anyway, I digress. But what it means is that if you need to be on the internet, there's always a password you can hack or use or what have you. And I got on the internet early because there was a Go server at the Carnegie Mellon, and I got on to play Go. And had I been a little bit smarter, I would have been a .com billionaire. But that's another one. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. Anyway, but it's really a great world of a lot of different things. Right now, I'm playing a little game called Backyard Monsters, which is a Facebook game. I quit playing Mafia Wars, Farmville, Fishville, Gooberville, whatever, you know. I'm playing a game on the iPhone. I just finished sort of, I'm not playing it much anymore, but I really recommend it. It's called Plants vs. Zombies. I want to recommend a game called Slay. Anybody played that? It's an old PC game that I played. I bet I played it 10 years ago on the PC. It's from a shareware guy in the UK, and it's just a wonderful game. It's highly addictive, and they have all these little hexagonal maps that you have to take over and kill the other guys. It's a worthy thing. And Atari, I'm back on the board of Atari, which is kind of fun. Being on the board as opposed to CEO is kind of like grandfatherhood versus fatherhood. You know, you can advise, but you don't have the ultimate responsibility, you know. And Atari is moving towards the online world, and all of your old Atari favorites are coming back, well produced and with futuristic spins to them. And so go into Atari Go or Atari.com, and over the next 6 months, we're going to blow your socks off. Anyway, that's a commercial. Let's see, what else? I'm working on the Versix project. I'm working on school, in which a lot of the curriculum is delivered by video game. It turns out that one of the problems with today's schools are that the teachers, about a third of them are as dumb as a post. And one of the things that is always baffling to me is why certain things are never talked about. Like, there's all kinds of statistics that kids, a lot of the kids that drop out of high school do so because of bad teachers. Do you hear about that? No. Do you believe that there are bad teachers in the world? You can't fire them. Of course there are bad teachers. I believe that every company that has their head screwed on should automatically can 5% of their employees every year. If you're not doing that, you're really messing up, because I'm telling you, people, it sounds heartless, doesn't it? What if I would tell you that it's absolutely the most noble thing you can do? Fire 5 to 10% of your employees every year. Why? Most people choose a career when they're about 22 or 23. What happens is that is really, you're not fully formed at 22 or 23, and some people find that they have gotten themselves into a really crappy job that they hate. Now, during the time, they're maybe 28 before they discover this, or 30. And by that time, they've got a wife and a house and a kid and a dog and a boat. The probability of you quitting and changing career at that time is exactly 0. But you can screw up and get fired. Wasn't my fault. It was that jerk boss of mine. What it does, it's a pressure relief valve. And the poor people who have lifetime employment in their crappy job, they go postal and go out and start shooting people, you know? And that's not a good thing. The number of people that I've fired and have come back to me 2 years later and said, it's the best thing that ever happened to me, is amazing. Of course, the only ones that come back are the ones that have done a big success. But anyway, it's one of those crazy things. But anyway, my school project, a lot of video games, a lot of exercise, a lot of fun. But if you ever get a chance to vote for firing bad teachers, do it. because it's really screwing up a lot of kids. Anyway, next. Yeah.
Most of your work is, or maybe all of your work has been in games for entertainment. And you just alluded to a serious game for education. I wonder how you feel about the value of gaming for purposes other than entertainment, such as education or marketing or any of the other purposes that games could be put to apart from entertainment.
The question was, how do I feel about games other than entertainment? I don't think it's a good question, because I believe that all games need to be fun and about entertainment. The fact that you're learning something is an elegant design. I mean, to create a game that is not entertaining and yet teaches you something is kind of missing the point. You really want to have a game that is entertaining and fun. For example, Pokemon. If instead, when they were designing Pokemon, instead of coming up with these strange Japanese names, if they just named one of them Fern Girl and, Algae Guy and various things. My son, I've got a 16-year-old, and he was heavy into Pokemon when he was about 11. He knew enough Pokemon characters that if it had been mapped onto the genus, phylum, curricula of biology, he could have passed sophomore biology. He knew their characteristics, he knew the names, he knew the things. He knew hundreds of them. So, why not? Let's just, I think the game would have been absolutely as much fun for him if it had been Algae Girl and Aardvark, what have you. Anyway. And so, I think that's the whole issue. One of the reasons the school is failing as bad as it is that the human brain is very plastic. And a gamer's brain is different than a non-gamer's brain. It molds around, it grows different dendrites, it has different skill sets, and various things. And what happens is we are not a society anymore that sits and absorbs some guy babbling onto you, like I'm doing right now. You're doing this because I have to interlace it with sexual innuendo. But if I didn't, you'd be out of here. And so what happens in school today is kids just tune out. I've got a wonderful slide. I should have put some of this stuff in there. But I've got a wonderful slide when I'm talking to a more serious, less fun group. That within 10 minutes of a typical classroom, 50% of the kids have tuned out. 10 minutes. So in a 40-minute class, it says that the typical class being taught by a professor, actually this wasn't college age, this was high school age, that it's 50%, 30%, 20%, 10% effective as the day goes on. What a waste of time. And kids who get a bad teacher, who are assigned a bunch of busy work, don't do the busy work, get a bad grade, they say, I'm out of here. Because today, a kid who has been homeschooled can get into a better college than a kid who has gone to a public school. That's wrong. And we're paying for that. Anyway, anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, adding on to what you just said, I did hear from the news in my area that the reason why
I can't hear you. I'm an old guy.
Sorry, I did hear from the news in my area that the reason why high school kids are dropping out is because they're bored.
Yeah.
And I do remember something from 6th grade. Our teacher did tell us that learning is not fun. She actually said that.
Yeah.
And she had this example following up. She said, suppose you're riding on the bike and you weren't wearing your helmet and your head cracks open. It's fun to learn to wear your helmet. So
Unfortunately, there are a lot of Calvinists in the world. You know, and one of the things you have to do is whenever you meet a Calvinist, it reminds me of the old story where the masochist meets the sadist, and the masochist says, beat me, and the sadist says, no. So when you meet a Calvinist, you know that they're not going to have fun, you know, and if you want to get into the video game business, designing games for Calvinists, I would quit right now. And, you know, there are just some people who love to be miserable. And I could do a rant on Islam right now, but I won't. Anyway, next.
You were talking about you were designing or working on games for education. Where can we view those games, or what places are actually implementing those games?
You said the Atari side or Versix? I'm not sure what.
Weren't you talking about you were working on school, like games for school?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering where we can actually.
I'm in stealth mode right now.
Okay.
I will serve no wine before it's time. But I'm very, very passionate about it. And well, let me tell you a couple of things. I'm going to try to crowdsource stuff. And what I'm doing is I'm breaking down the curriculum into about 600 modules. Each module, with a diligent student, can be completed in 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And all of them have recursive testing, so that if you don't do that well or miss things, it keeps going back. The idea is that you have to pass every module 100%. Turns out that if you expect 100% compliance, it changes the mindset of kids. And remember that learning is a delta function. That is, you build on previous blocks of information. And if you're building a brick wall and you try to build a wall and the underlying brick isn't there, you don't have it. So what you really want to do is you want everyone to get immediately aha moments over and over and over again by never allowing the holes in there. This system also allows you to create a very, very complete mind inventory. And so you know what the kid knows and how he knows it. But I don't want to get on the education side. We can be all night. Yeah.
Sorry, it was an education question. I was just gonna ask you what you anticipate being the biggest hurdles for infusing gaming into the education sector, whether it be Board of Educations or superintendents, or where do you foresee the biggest roadblocks?
Our government is here to screw us up. And so, you know, okay. I believe that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the number one enemy is the National Teachers Association, the teachers union. They are evil. And unfortunately, they have most of the politicians in their pockets. And so what I plan to do is to stay somewhat stealth. You know, you don't make a big bunch of noise until you have proven the efficacy of your program. You know, better SATs, better understanding, lower dropout rates, all those sorts of things. And then you go really, really loud and try to embarrass everybody on the other side. You know, because the people who take themselves too serious while doing evil don't respond well to ridicule. And the more you can ridicule them and point out their foibles, the madder they get. And then they become their own worst enemies, because the more they lash out, the more you can ridicule them some more. And it's a wonderful positive feedback of ridicule and various things. And the end goal really is to adopt vouchers and to take the school system private. Because unfortunately, as much as I would love to have a public school system, it's so broken right now that it has to go through this phase of regroup and privatization, and then I think it can possibly go back into a public structure. But you basically have to throw the baby out with the bathwater on a lot of this stuff. It's just broken. Okay, game questions.
In your career, what would you consider your greatest achievement, and what is your biggest regret?
My greatest achievement are my 8 kids, which, let me rant on that for a minute. You guys are all smart. Procreate. Understand that if you don't procreate, that if you have 1 or 2 kids, they are going to be awash in a world of stupid in about 20 years. And remember that we're doing a lot of anti-Darwinism going on right now, in which the stupid are just multiplying by rabbits, and the smart are delaying and not doing very much. And I think it's a problem. I purposefully wanted to have a lot of copies of my DNA. So I have 8 kids, and I'm really glad because I love them all. And they're all smart, and they're going to be very, very wealthy someday and keep me in a style of which I've become accustomed. But more than that, I'm an arrogant guy. And I think that my DNA just needs to be out there going strong. And I just wished I was a little bit of a bigger bastard, and I'd try some wild stuff, but I haven't done that. Clear in the back.
So what's your word on ET for the Atari 2600?
After my time, and Atari was awash in stupid for a period. Okay. I got to tell you really a funny story. Now, big mucky muck executives, limo driver limousines, and at Atari, kind of the rock star record company executive mindset. Why did they build more ET cartridges than there were consoles? When asked that question, the answer was, well, they might want to play it at their second home. And so you'd have a cartridge in both places, but you'd only have a player in one. I see. No, it was so out of control. When Jack Tramiel took over Atari, there was actually a warehouse that had over 100 cars that were still on lease that had not been turned back. And they were all like Porsches and BMWs and things like that. Because one of the problems is that all of us who designed the VCS and all that, we left. I mean, I told the guys at Warner the day we shipped the first VCS that it was obsolete. They looked at me like I was crazy. I said, look, it's going to take us 3 years to get a new console that's really spiffed up into the marketplace. If we don't start right now, we're going to need it in 3 years. And the real crash in '83 was all about trying to push the 2600 past its useful life. I mean, the 2600 had 128 bytes of memory. Not kbytes, bytes. Now let's do a little brain picture here. How do you do chess with 128 bytes of memory? You got 64 squares, you got 32 pieces, you got time. How do you do it? We did it, but it was, it's hard. And there were so many things that we couldn't do. We actually had a list, and we thought we could do maybe 20 games with the VCS when we designed it, because we knew it was really hard to program. You had to, in software, you had to keep track of the horizontal trace. You had to get your code executed before the line came across. So you were doing timing, you were doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was a nightmare, but it was cheap. And it only had 128 bytes of memory because it was cheap, because memory was very expensive. From the time we started until the time we started shipping, memory had dropped almost an order of magnitude. So we could have essentially, on the next version, we could have put almost a full screen map. And once you got a screen map, then Katie bar the door, because you can write to it and do all kinds of things, and you can do really cool games to the level of the resolution of your screen map. But anyway, that was things. Oh, somebody asked me what my biggest regret was. It's a pretty big one. I don't know. There's a part of me that wishes I hadn't sold Atari when I did to Warner, because they really screwed it up. And you hate to see your children abused by others. And I always looked at Atari as kind of one of my children. But at the same time, I was young and rich and unemployed at the same time. And it was during that time that I wooed and wed my current wife, and raced sailboats and did a few things that were really fun. That I think if I'd have gotten really totally sucked into the Atari rat race, I wouldn't have done that. And so there's a little bit of that going on. It's really easy. Business is just too damn much fun. And it can suck you into it so much where all of a sudden you don't have a life. And you think you do, but you don't. And so I think the best life is a life of balance, where you balance free time and family and community and your business. And early on, hard to do, because you always have problems that need to be solved. You always have customers that are pissed off. And so, I like building companies and selling them. It's kind of like, how you feel after you have your last final? And you know that you don't have any homework for the next little while? That's fun. Am I out of time? I guess I am. Thanks a lot.